Hey there, and welcome to the Planner Pals podcast, a podcast hosted by two true Planner Pals. My name is Mark, or Mark Your Pages.
And I'm Jess, or Jessie Corinne, and in today's episode, we're going to be exploring digital planning, the world of digital planners, digital planner apps. Have we used them? What do we think? Pros and cons, all of that good stuff. Now, in terms of digital planning, I feel like I just don't know very much about the space at all because I haven't really tried a lot of things out. Mark, have you used any digital planning apps before?
I have. I actually am a really big digital planning app fan. I've tried a handful of them over the years, GoodNotes being one that I've used before, and then most recently working along with Zinnia, which in my mind is one of the best digital planning apps out there. This is not a sponsored podcast by them. It should be because I love them so much. But we'll talk more about that as we go through. But really, we just also wanted to talk about just our pros and cons as we've gone through it. I think that's probably the biggest conversation when it comes to digital planning versus analog planning. And something that always goes through my mind, which again, reasons I love this podcast with you, is because I don't think about these things. I always think about digital planning as an app, but you were talking recently about digital planning actually being more than just an app and actually the digital tools that you're using as well.
Yeah, I feel like in terms of planning and planners, that is very much how we organize maybe one kind of facet of our life. Like, I don't know, personal knowledge management and tasks, events, happenings, that kind of stuff. But then there's a whole bunch of other things that we also have to organize in our lives that don't necessarily happen inside of those apps specifically. So it could be things like your calendar apps is good for events and things like that. You can have like budgeting and finance trackers and stuff that you do digitally, mainly because you don't want to do the math yourself. Yes, that is me. But all of those other things that happen in your kind of like digital ecosystem that help you be organized and effectively are helping you plan, but they're not a traditional planner per se.
Yeah, and I think what's really cool is digital planning has so many pros and cons to it. And I think a lot of them in the pro space is the fact that you can combine a lot of things together and use them. And most of the times they sync pretty well together as well. I think that's one of my favorite things, or at least when I'm looking for a good digital planner or have been in the past. I think one of the most important parts for me is that you can always have it with you. And I think there may be a few people out there that'll be like, Mark, I use an analog bullet journal or planner, and that baby comes with me everywhere. I know plenty of people who do that. But I am not one of those people. Like, if I'm going to the grocery store, I am not taking my bullet journal. I also don't carry anything on me. It'd be weird to be like, here's a square bullet journal, in my little shopping bag here in case I need it. I love the fact that a digital tool can go anywhere with you and it can be on multiple devices. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that. I also really love the fact that you can work on things in small bits with digital planning, I feel like, because if you are, say you're at the DMV and that's a long wait, you can always pop out your phone, or if you do take your tablet with you or anything, and you can be working through something. You can be in your mail app and taking care of something here in your notes app, or if you are using a specific digital planner as well inside of there and making things happen. Whereas I feel like it's a little bit more bulky to do analog reading, like your pen holder, and you also need your notebook, right? And usually a ruler or something. Just always one of those things that I just there are a lot of pros to digital planning, but I just always can't get into the groove, I guess, enough with it. But that's because some of my cons, I feel like, maybe deter it a little bit. I don't know if you've had any experience for yourself with that idea of take it anywhere or multiple devices that you prefer about digital planning or don't.
I think that that's a very valid point. Like the multiple devices in particular, it's like you can write something down on your phone and then access it on your tablet, or, type something up on your computer and access it on your phone or whatever. That's really, really useful. And also just kind of cloud syncing and that idea of it has a backup. It's okay if I lose my phone because it's still somewhere else. That's really helpful. I also really liked your point about the fact that it's you can do bite-sized planning almost. You don't need a big flat surface to lay out all of your materials. You could just be in the line somewhere, typing out things on your phone into your digital planner. That's something that I hadn't necessarily thought about, but would be really useful.
Yeah, it's been really cool. Zinnia for me was where I really started to do that a lot more, and where I tried to keep it, because it works on your phone, it works on a tablet, it works on your computer, but only for Apple devices. I do have to say that because I know a lot of people get bummed out. It's not for Android or other pieces, but it was a really cool experience and is a really cool experience because I use it for other type of note taking and ideation sometimes. But that I love, and the syncing, should have put that in my my pros as well, because that is a great spot where you're just like, you put it down one place, you pick it up in another, and it's there, and you just kind of keep going with it. It carries a good flow. I think for myself, what has always kind of deterred me though from utilizing a digital planner, at least if I think about like an app like planning, like basically replacing my analog bullet journal with a digital bullet journal. And this sounds so silly, but that a notebook doesn't run out of battery, right? So like you are out, you're doing things. If you don't have a charger or a way to charge your phone or your tablet and that dies, you're kind of dead in the water in a way. I mean, you might have to revert back to some analog planning there. And that used to happen to me a lot when I used to carry my iPad around with me, because I think we've talked about this before. Before I got into analog planning, I was like, I'm pure digital. So I did everything digitally. I was using Evernote way back in the day for like notes. I wasn't really using it the way it needed to be, but that was the worst when you're like in a meeting and you didn't charge your iPad before you got there and it just dies. And you're like, guess my notes are done for the day.
Yeah. It's a nice easy way to make sure that you're not taking too many notes, I suppose. You have to make everything abridged so that you don't waste too much battery power typing down just like absolutely anything. But yeah, I think that the battery life is probably a pretty big con. I've never had it that my battery has run out based on just like note taking though. Usually it's because I'm doing something that requires a lot more power, and I think most of the time I could plan ahead.
No, this is definitely one of those things where I've been using my iPad all day long for other things. And then I go into a meeting where I need to like be productive or do something, or I forget to charge it overnight. And you're at like 25% when you get to work and you're like, nope, this isn't going to last for me, or whatever that might look like.
The overnight charging one is the worst. The number of times that I like think I've plugged my phone in and then it's like not plugged in all the way, or it's come loose from the wall or something. Like, cool. Yes, I did want to start the day on 20%. Thank you.
Yeah, it's one of those you're like, all right, well, let me find a charger and, pray that this thing works out.
Don't mind me, I'll just be in the corner, like attached to the wall, like typing out my notes over here, guys.
The other thing that I didn't necessarily love about digital planning that I can't is this idea of like writing versus typing. I think one of the biggest things that I've gotten out of planning for myself is that idea, and you might know the better word for this, but the idea of like writing to remember. Does it have a special term?
Oh, I'm not sure, but I know exactly what you mean. Is that idea of like when you handwrite something, because it's like a muscle-led activity, there's more kind of, I don't know, mental investment. You remember what you write better. Something like that.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Now, I'm not going to say that the experience writing on a tablet hasn't improved over time. I mean, when I got my very first iPad and I was trying to make all this work with like GoodNotes and whatnot, it was horrible. It's like the truest, ugliest form of your handwriting. And you're like, this is digital. It should be better. And it's not whatsoever. And you can't read your own notes, So I will say, like, I love, again, to talk about Zinnia, like they actually have something similar to the art apps where you can control like your loop. So instead of it being like a scraggly loop, you can control how like nice and smooth it is as you write. And then I'm like, oh, my handwriting looks beautiful. I love this. But I always found that typing into a notes app or into a digital place, I have a harder time retaining that information. It's very much that muscle memory idea here for me. So with digital productivity tools, I find that, I don't know, it's just a little bit of more of a disconnect for me personally. And I really love the feeling of writing in a notebook, or even writing on an iPad can be okay. But I'm just not the type of guy that's going to buy, like, I know you can buy those covers for your iPad that make it feel a little bit more rougher, like you're writing on paper. I know some people buy like special accessories for their pens. I'm just trying to jot down a note here. I don't need to go too crazy.
You say that, but I feel like, I just need to jot down a note here. Let me go find my best, most expensive fountain pen and write it down with that.
Oh, damn it, Jess, you got me.
Called out. But no, I completely get what you mean by that. Especially, I feel like the technology has gotten a lot better in terms of being able to handwrite on a iDevice, tablet, whatnot. Because in the way back whens, you'd write it out, it would look so damn janky. And I'm just like, is it just because you're trying to like lock me into some kind of pixel grid or something, and now it's just like totally scraggly, disgusting looking? No, it's probably me. It's obviously my fault. And you kind of go like, oh, okay, I can write really nicely on paper. It really shouldn't be that hard to be able to do this on a digital tool as well. But alas, it is. I find that the hardest part is when I'm trying to write anything kind of like cursive. When you have to like backtrack your pen in certain places to make certain letter forms and whatever, and you try and backtrack it on a tablet and it's never aligned properly. So then one section's like chonky fat and the other part's like beautifully thin, and you're like, nah, this isn't what I wanted. But in terms of actually like the writing versus typing, I type a lot faster faster than I write. So that's actually a pro for me. I find that especially when I need to get a lot of things out of my head, which is most days, like taking down heaps of information at once, typing is a lot faster. So I prefer it in terms of like maybe one of my pros for digital planning, because if I was going to be using a digital planner, I would probably be typing more than I'd be handwriting.
Yeah, and one thing we can talk about afterwards, because I want to get into your pros and cons too. There's a lot of notebooks and other options out there that record your handwriting and then digitize it as well. I don't know if we want to consider that digital planning necessarily versus a digital archive, but I'm just going to put a pin in that for after we get through these, because that's something that just popped into my mind.
And don't forget to write down that other point, otherwise we will totally forget. Before we do these episodes, we do try and write out like a general outline of what it is we want to talk about. And I'm very bad at looking at them until we like get right before recording. So I'm like, what's going on today? Who even knows? So always appreciate that the outline is there for me. Thank you, Mark. But I guess my second pro would probably have to be around the idea of legibility versus time. So if I'm going to be writing things down really, really quickly using handwriting, oftentimes it looks super bloody scrappy, very messy. Sometimes future Jess comes back to the list and she's like, I don't know how you thought this was going to be helpful because I can't read any of this. Whereas if I'm doing it on a digital, tool, usually it's typed, which means it's a lot more legible. Sure, there might be spelling errors, but usually the red squiggle helps me out and says, hey, did you mean this? So that's always been kind of a benefit in terms of using digital tools. I mean, also, I guess you could say that spell check is there because, gosh, my spelling's not good.
Oh my gosh, just the other day I was filling out a form and I had to write it in and I was just spelling things wrong and I was trying to correct it and then overcorrect it. And I was like, why? This is 2024. Why is this form not digital? Please, so I can easily fix these mistakes. Like, I don't know, I just get over it instead of my journal where I'm like, who cares? I'm the only one reading it. But yeah, having spell check would be great, especially if you're sharing notes or like sharing information, would be better.
Yeah, I think that that's another pro would just be mistake fixing is so much easier. In a digital tool, you just like, delete something, move something to a place that you want to have it, anything like that. Whereas if I need to make a mistake fix on paper, it's like, okay, let's get out the whiteout or let's get out a scrap piece of paper or let's put a white sticker label onto it. That's my favorite one. But it's more just like the administrative cost of having to fix those mistakes. It takes a lot longer to do those things. Whereas if you're using a digital tool, it's a lot more seamless. And oftentimes the mistakes that you do make, if it's spelling in particular, they give you a little heads up like, hey, just wanted to let you know that word isn't what you think it is.
Yeah. I feel like Apple's making it like easier and easier for people to use digital tools. I haven't even really took a full dive into like all the new stuff they just announced with their Apple Intelligence / it's really called AI, like artificial intelligence. But they have so much stuff with their Notes app now that I feel like that they're doing. And it really got me intrigued into it as well, because it almost is like magic with a wand sometimes, I feel like, because that was a really big thing for me, that when I was doing digital planning before too, like I had to put my pencil down to like back up or to change something. I don't know, Apple themselves have done a lot with the pencil where you just like cross it out or do some like little magic swoop or something and it gets rid of it or does a thing. So I also feel like we said before that technology moving forward has made that experience a lot more seamless, which, just things get better over time as well that makes you enjoy them.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of like, another pro you could think about is I'm going to say the amount of tools you need, even though I know damn well full and good that you only need a notebook and a pen, but I don't care because I want the rest of everything else as well. Like if you're digitally planning, you need what? Your app, your thing to write on, your thing to write with. So I don't know, stylus, pencil, whatever like that, tablet, and then whatever application you're using. Whereas if you're going to be doing planning on paper, and if you're more of a decorative planner or somebody who likes to be a little bit more creative, then you have things like your tape, your stickers, your stamps, your inks, and everything else, which takes up a fair bit more room, I suppose, than just your pencil, tablet, which the app is in the tablet, so it doesn't even take up space. But yeah, a little bit more compact, which means it's a little bit more transportable, I suppose. That would be a pro. Kind of similar to what you said before. Another one that's kind of related to that idea of supplies would also be accessibility in terms of decorative styles. It's a lot easier, I think, to be decorative in a digital planner. Like, you don't have to have a lot of artistic talent. Like, you still need to be a creative person, because I think that everybody's creative in their own way. But in terms of actually having the ability to like paint or draw or anything like that, it's a lot more accessible to do that in a digital tool, because you can bring in like clip art pictures, you can buy digital sticker packs and things like that. I think that Zinnia has some kind of like decorative tools in their space.
Some kind of. It is the most incredible, insane library I've ever seen in my entire life, and there's always new content. Nicole from Plans That Blossom, she actually works for Zinnia, and I think she's the creative director. Like, she's the one organizing and curating all this stuff. And I say to her all the time, I'm like, how do you continue to, like, how is there more stuff in the universe for you to do that? But it's definitely one of those things that I probably love the most about it, because when you are writing down things on paper, using a stamp, painting, whatever, it's kind of a one and done deal. But what's great about digital planning and even digital creative planning is the idea that I can lay all this stuff out here, and if I don't like the way it looks, I just delete it or get rid of it. I think it's probably one of the best pieces, and there's a lot of different options there too. And I think there's that level of like enjoying planning even more because of it. Similar to kind of what you were just saying there, which is, if you like creative stamps or being creative, writing them, using them, it just makes you enjoy planning a lot more. I mean, we've talked about that for yourself. You're like, if I wasn't creative planning, I wouldn't be doing this. Like, it's a really big benefit to my planning style and how I like to do it. And so I think that is really important, and completely agree. Digitally just makes it so much easier.
Yeah, if I don't like the way my planner looks, I'm not going to use it, which doesn't make it a very useful or functional planner. So for me, like, the form or the kind of attractiveness, aesthetic elements, they are functional, because if they're not there, there is no use. So it's kind of nice that the digital tools allow for people to do that in a way that's probably a little bit more approachable, very reversible, which is kind of nice. I think that the biggest pro, though, for digital planning is the ability to move the dates that things are happening without having to cross things out or scribble them out or anything like that and make a gosh dang mess of my beautiful planner. So I just, drag and drop. It's not happening on Thursday, it's happening on Friday, all of that kind of stuff. So that's really helpful.
That was a really cool feature of Zinnia too that I love, is that you can actually write down dates and then actually turn them into calendar appointments right from the app and like connect it. So it's this idea that, yes, you're using a digital planner to capture that, but they're taking it to that next level, similar to what you were talking about before. You can use this app for your creative planning, but then use another digital tool like your calendar, where you're probably keeping, or reminders or whatever that is. It's this big like syncy cycle that is just another really big pro, I feel like, of it, is that, which is just, there's so many good pros out there where I can think about it. Like, the cons are difficult to kind of think through sometimes, because you're like, well, I could just charge my iPad before I go to work, or have a charger with me always. That solves that problem right there. There's just other ones too that you're just kind of like, man, I don't know. But I do love a lot of that, like easy moving, syncing, not forgetting, doing it in that moment versus waiting till later and then forgetting to do that. I have that happen a lot.
Yeah, I think that your point about it just being able to integrate with other apps is really, really useful as well. It's like, if you have these other things that you have to use for like work or for specific other areas of your life, you can kind of bring them all in together in some way where they are able to like cross share information and stuff. That's really useful. In terms of cons though, I think that one of the big ones for me would be just like a loss of flexibility in terms of being able to set up my layouts the way that I want. Now, this is going to be very much like app or tool dependent, because some apps, like, it's effectively just writing on paper. You can still set up whatever you want, but there's a lot of freedom when it comes to working in just like a blank or Docker or notebook, which is what I use. So I don't think that I'd be able to give that up very easily. As said, it is app dependent. Obviously, there are some apps where you still have that level of flexibility, but usually they're not necessarily the ones that I want to use, or there's like other things that I have to consider. So could be a con, depends on how you like to plan though.
I would say that was my experience when I used GoodNotes, because I purchased a planner that worked in there, and I got very into it, where I was trying to create my own planners in there, because you had to basically create like an editable PDF or like a PowerPoint type thing. And then there was a lot that went into it. I think that's why I didn't really do it, but there are big businesses of it where you download themes and whatever else about it. But what I didn't like about it was that if it wasn't exactly how I wanted to use my planner, I was kind of stuck. So it was like, well, if I didn't want this page to come after this page, well, I bought it and that's exactly how it is. Now, again, like Zinnia is a bit different because you can move pages around a little bit more than that. But like you said, very app dependent. But you have to be the person that likes to do that, because other people could get like paralysis, be like, too many options. I just want exactly what's here and to do that. But again, it's that flexibility when you need it. I agree with you. I also love about just a analog notebook for that.
I think a similar kind of related point would also be a kind of restriction or a lessening in terms of what you're able to do in terms of the styling, possibly. Like, for instance, if I want to write notes down in my journal, I can write them in like any kind of lettering style I want. I can put my headers anywhere I want. I can make my headers any size I want. Whereas some digital tools are going to restrict you in terms of what kind of styles you can use in that space. Could also restrict you in terms of what kind of maybe decorative elements you can bring into those. Like, I can draw anything. Let's say that with a caveat. I can attempt to draw anything, but like, in terms of doing that in your digital tools, like maybe it doesn't have the functionality to be able to draw. Maybe it doesn't have the functionality to be able to bring in pictures and stuff like that. There are ones that can, but there are also ones that cannot.
Yeah, and those features are going to cost more too, right? I mean, if you're going to have something that's full-fledged doing all of that, a lot of them have subscription bases that you have to purchase, or you have to buy the app and the subscription. You know, there's a lot of different cost models that come into that. Someone could easily say, well, so does analog planning. Like, you have to buy the notebook and the pens and have all of the, like, I don't have to have all of this. I like to have all of this. I don't need it to plan. Definitely like to have it to plan. But it's something that you do have to consider also, is that, like you said, those features that help make things better usually have a price to them too, versus the free apps that are out there that are super limited.
Yeah, or have ads everywhere, and you're like, cool, I just wanted to go and check my planner, and now it's like, download God of War or something. I'm like, no, I don't want to. Leave me alone. But your point about subscription-based services, I cannot. Like, when it comes to applications in particular, like, no, I want to give you a flat fee and just be able to use it. Like, that is what I want. I don't mind having to buy, like, additional sticker packs on top of that or whatever, if you don't want to have, like, access to the full creative library. But the idea of having to pay a subscription to access information that is like my planner is such a turnoff. But then I also like your point about the fact that notebooks are kind of like a subscription, because you have to buy a new notebook when one runs out. So, but that one again, it's like, it's not dictated by their timeline though. It's dictated by your own timeline. Like, I could just use less pages in my notebook and make it last longer, rather than every month on the 3rd, here's your bill, pay us money.
That's the thing about Zinnia that they do. They do have a subscription model, but you just pay for the year. And I was always like, oh, but would I, like trying to figure that out. And you can try it for free, right, to see if you like it before you actually buy it, which I think is great. But what really bothered me about GoodNotes is that you just had to buy the app. And the problem is that, like, I forget, I think I had GoodNotes 5, I want to say it might have been when I did this. And then it was like not long later, GoodNotes 6 came out. And I'm thinking, well, wait a second now. Like, I want all the new features of the app. Like, it was very weird to me that instead of just updating their current app, like most apps do, right, just continuously update, they were like, no, we're going to create a new app, GoodNotes 6, that has all these new bells and whistles for your planning needs. And I'm like, wait, so now I have to stop using this one to buy that one. And I was like out, not using GoodNotes because of that. I just really hated that model. It just was very much against how I like to work with apps. I'd rather do, like I said, with Zinnia, know that every update that comes through Zinnia, I've already paid for, basically, right? Like, I'm getting all the stuff as they're putting it out, not that I have to go buy Zinnia 2 to get all these cool new features. And then basically, it's like digital trash. In my mind, I'm like, I'm getting rid of, that's trashing something. It's such a waste. And I'm like, Mark, it's digital. Like, it's not, you're not wasting materials there.
I think that's an interesting point, because I do not like subscription models, but I completely understand that, like, you have to pay to have things update over time, and then by paying the subscription you get the updated stuff. So, like, part of me knows this, but then part of me is like, that's a lot of sushi, so I don't know. I have a very interesting relationship with, like, the way that things are priced and stuff, and it's a tricky mix for that one. I think that one of my biggest, I don't know, pain points or cons when it comes to a digital planner system would just be that kind of like loss of ability to do my hand lettering. Like, over time, my hand lettering has improved so much just by using my journal, not even necessarily active practicing of my lettering, but if I go back into my past journals and have a look at how I thought letters were supposed to look, and I was so proud of myself. I was so proud of how it looked, and now I look back and I go, girl, oh no, oh dear. But Seeing that improvement over time and then having that archive is just really, it feels rewarding. And I know that you probably could do it in a digital space, but I don't think it would feel the same.
It's a completely different feeling because I've watched artists work in different apps, and it's always like they'll draw a line, then erase it, draw a line back, draw a line back. And they'll spend forever just trying to get this one swoop right. And I get that we also do that when you do it analog. And again, I'm not even talking about planning, I'm just talking about art creation. But there is this idea that, like, well, I'm going to try to do my best now because it's kind of a one-shot deal over here. There's definitely benefits to be able to undo things or, you know, quickly go back if you make a mistake. But you do, I agree with you, lose a lot of kind of that, I call it enjoyment, but just that memory of learning a skill like that, because it is a skill that you're learning. Not that you're not learning it digitally. I think there's a lot of experimentation that can happen there, but definitely try it with real tools. Analog, not real tools. I don't want to discredit anyone who does things digitally, but, you know, grab a pen and paper and try it out there too. Give both a try, see how it works out.
I guess that's also kind of a con in a way, which con maybe is not necessarily the right word for it, but like learning how to use your digital tool, there is a kind of like upfront skill cost where you have to have that period of not really knowing how the tool works, figuring out where things are, how it actually gets used and stuff. Whereas most people, I feel like if you give them a notebook and a pen, provided they learn how to write and draw a line, they're probably going to be fine. There's not like a really big kind of learning curve with that. Yes, there's probably some kind of like a learning curve when it comes to doing the artistic parts if you want to be drawing in there and stuff like that. Maybe a little bit different in terms of like the upfront cost for skilling up, upskilling to use your digital planner versus just an analog system.
So let's go ahead and talk about the apps that we've used. And we've mentioned so many of them as we've gone through it. One of the things that came to mind when we were talking about this just now is because for a hot minute, I had a digital planning Instagram account that I started when I was like, I'm going to start doing this more. It was when I was using GoodNotes. And I was like, okay, we'll figure this out. And I remember some of the comments in there being like, well, it must be nice to have the benefit of having the money to buy an iPad to do this. And that just wasn't something that I really thought about at that time. It was like, oh, it's a privilege to have those items. So of course you can do that. And I was like, oh gosh, now I feel guilty that I have an iPad. I always feel like you don't have to have those things. If you don't have those items to do that, then there's other ways that you can go about it. I think the apps are similar because, you know, I talked about Zinnia. That's a Mac only product. And so I know that it probably makes people feel very, you know, limited or left out if you don't have an iPad. And I'm sure maybe some people feel guilt or FOMO or whatever about that and getting into it. So, I mean, I'll say as much as I love Zinnia, that is one of the things that I feel like could potentially be better and kind of more inclusive of everyone. I have zero idea what goes into the development of that, but I can say that for myself, I've really enjoyed using that because of all the pieces we mentioned before. You have all these libraries of lettering and stickers and graphics and kind of everything. They also have these really cool like functional stickers that have text boxes already built into them. So it's like, I like the way this looks, and put it on your page and then can fill it in, type it in, write it in, which I love too. I mentioned GoodNotes. Again, I think what was most intriguing about GoodNotes for me is that it was like my step up into kind of a more advanced digital planning. A lot of the planners that I was looking at all had like hotspot linking to them. So you would click on a tab to go to each month or whatever that looked like. And I think I was more enamored by the functionality of the thing than necessarily like how I was using it. I loved like, oh, I could create my own and do all these pieces, not so much like, here's how you use it. And then for me, Evernote was really my first like hoorah into like real digital planning beyond like Todoist and some of those to-do apps. And what I really liked about Evernote was, well, it was my very first time writing digitally. It was a Apple Pencil, or maybe it was before the Apple Pencil. It was just a stylus and my iPad. And I thought it was the coolest thing to be just full digital in meetings at work and not have to carry all this extra crap with me and write down all these notes. But the biggest problem for me with that one, and eventually why I moved from that, was that there was no way to like find those notes again. Or I had, no, let's not say that. They did have like a handwriting search feature, which for me, they were like, good luck, buddy. We don't know what you're looking for. But the idea that I didn't have a structure like the bullet journal method, there was no index that said, go to this this page to get this information or whatever. It was like almost like you would do in a notebook without an index, flip through it, be like, where was that note again?
I love the idea of being able to search your handwriting because searchability is probably, I think, a very big pro when it comes to digital planning, like being able to find snippets of information just using a search feature. I've only ever done that with like type-based text rather than handwritten text. So it's cool to know that that functionality is out there somewhere because when it comes to my digital planners, quote, quote, none of them have been handwritten because I do not like handwriting on digital tools. I am not good at it. And I know that it's the kind of thing like I would learn over time, I'd upskill and it'd be fine. I couldn't be bothered. I have other things that I need to do. I kind of come to this conclusion that there are just going to be some things in my life that I just am not good at because I'm not willing to put in the kind of like time, effort, energy to upskill in them. And I think that hand lettering on a device that is digital is one of those things. So when it comes to my digital planners, when I was doing digital planning, for this sounds really silly, for one entire month, okay? So this is after I've started bullet journaling. I was coming towards the end of the year and my journal did not have enough space to be able to fit the last 2 months of the year. I'm like, okay, so I can either use this for November and start a new planner or bullet journal in December, which just like I could, but I don't want to. I want to start a new journal with the new year. It's always such a satisfying feeling and I didn't want to give that up. So I'm like, okay, well, we could try and cram everything into the small amount of space you have, but realistically, you know that you are going to need more space. I was using a B6 at the time, which is already a small journal, and then trying to cram 2 months into the same amount of space that 1 month would fit is just like not the business. So it's like, what other solutions are there here? What could I do instead? And honestly, I feel like I should have actually just used an A6. I didn't think of it at the time because I was like, well, I'm already in something small. I don't want to go smaller, but it would have been a fun experiment for a month. But instead, what I did was set up effectively like a digital bullet journal in Notion. Kinda, right? So it has like, your Notion dashboard with your different sections. It's got the calendar, it's got the task app and stuff. But I also got to build in things like my actions list for my goals. It had like pre-built in kind of reflection questions and stuff for your mid-month and end-of-month check-ins and things, weekly reviews and stuff. And it was so much fun building out all of those sections, having each of the individual templates. So I had like a template for the monthly setup, and then within that I had templates for each of the weeks, and then within like those spaces I also had the templates for the reflection and stuff, so you didn't have to like rebuild things every single time, which was so satisfying. Because when it comes to setting up my journal, I set up the same kind of layouts month after month anyway. I might do a slightly different style or tweak the layout so it looks a little different to keep it fresh so I don't get hella bored, but being able to just hit a button and have everything already set up was so cool, to the extent where I was like, okay, well, I've gone through and I've made this tool and it's really, really useful. And sure, I'm only using it for a month, but that doesn't mean that other people might not get benefits out of it. So I put it on my little shop, my gorgeous baby shop on the internet, sitting out there selling all of like 6 digital products that are like, I don't know, printables. And we've got the finance tracker, which is the same one that I use to do all of my financial tracking because I do not want to have to get out my calculator and add things up myself. And then also my Notion bullet journal. So cute.
That's awesome.
I thought it was cool. I love it. And it's been nice to hear other people enjoying it too. So that's really good. I think that the benefits of that, though, it's like in terms of decorative style and stuff, you can just take pictures from things like Unsplash and stuff like that, which is like a free stock picture website. You can get them from other places as well, but that's one that's actually linked into Notion, which made it really easy. You can, play around with color palettes and all of that kind of thing. Of course, it is more limited than, I don't know, my full set of Tombos and Crayolas and Karen markers and whatever else. But there's still ways to bring a little bit of fun into it and make it a little bit more decorative, which I need. But then being able to type into it, that was really good because I type so much faster than I handwrite. But then I suppose there is also a benefit in the fact that handwriting is slow, right? Which means that like you don't have to, but you're typically going to be a little bit more intentional about what you're writing down because writing is a bit more of a slower tactile process. It kind of ends up being this like automatic filter, which I know the bullet journal is kind of built on. It's like if it's not worth rewriting, then it's probably not worth doing. Whereas if I'm doing a typed list, it's a copy paste. It takes all of about like 5 seconds, and that's mainly navigating from where I was copying it from to where I'm copying it to. So you don't necessarily have that friction in there anymore that starts to help you kind of whittle down your list into just the essentials of stuff that you need to get done, which is kind of a key part of bullet journaling. So only stuck with it for a month because I do like paper more.
I was going to say, when you said that, the bullet journal method taught me that, because when I was was in school, way before I knew about the bullet journal method, I would write down every single note that every single person said. I felt like I needed the paragraphs of information to remember it. The bullet journal method has certainly taught me that you do not. Like, take out the most important pieces that are an action, right? Or are an important thing that you need to combine with something else. Those are the important pieces of it. And that has really made a big difference for me. I'd be curious because I haven't really tried it much in like any type of other setting other than just like personally, like, you know, being like, oh, let's take this month and see what that would look like digitally, or trying to use a much more watered down version of it myself. It would be really interesting to see if I would work the same way inside of a digital planner now as I do in my bullet journal if I was typing versus writing. I think that would be the big thing, but I've never tried to type in it. I've always handwritten because it was an option, and I'm so used to it now.
Yeah, I think it would be very interesting to tackle a digital bullet journaling system, being very, very mindful of the original method, and like how the approach there would be a little bit different based on what I kind of default to, which is like, hey, let's just get everything out of my head, brain dump it all, and then keep that brain dump forever because things that you've written down are probably important. The number of brain dumps that I just have sitting as a very poorly named file on my desktop on my computer, oh my gosh. Like, usually it just saves the first entry in the list, and it's not helpful whatsoever. And I every so often go back through them and start looking at all the stuff I've written down, and most of the tasks, they either like, you know, got done and I didn't check them off, or they've become obsolete, or like I've just written the same thing 6 times in 6 different documents or whatever. Not a smart system, but that's when I get overwhelmed though. That's when I need to just get things out of my head, and typing is so helpful for that because I'm just so much faster at it. I think it also helps though, like I went to a school where you had a laptop, like it was BYOD, like bring your own device from year 5, you know, so learning to type happened at a very young age, so touch typing is like something I can do. I swear my touch typing has gotten worse though since I've been using a bullet journal, because I am not as good as I used to be, to the extent where I was genuinely thinking about taking a typing course last year.
Really? That's so interesting.
It's something that I've always kind of like, not like prided myself on or anything like that, but like, you know, it was a feel good point, like something that I could do, that like I can type fast because I can touch type. And I feel like I'm slowly losing that skill because I just type a lot less than I used to, maybe.
I'm sure there's online apps. I forget the name of the one we had back in the day, but it was that whole like typing quiz, and I remember the letters used to fall from the sky and you'd have to like type the letters real quick. And it was all about how many words per minute you could get.
It was the one that was like Space Invaders as well. So like the things would be falling down and like pew, 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 pew,
Yep.
ASDF space, semicolon, LJK, return, and having all of those like different things. I love it because that was like the first one you learned to like, you know, position your hands correctly on the keyboard. And that's why you've got those little notches on your keyboard, or like sometimes a different kind of feeling, so that you can like find your place again even if you're not looking at the keyboard. Like, see, now I'm just thinking about it, I want to go and relearn how to touch type, even though I like can still do it. It's just not as good. But then also my spelling sucks, so maybe it's my spelling, not my touch typing.
It definitely is both for me, for absolute sure.
In terms of other kind of like digital planners though, because really the only planner I've used has been that Notion one, but I do use other digital tools to help me with my kind of like personal organization. So I do still use Notion. I use it for like my content calendar in particular, mainly because then you can move things around. Also because those entries can just hold so much more information. If I had to hold all that information in my journal, I would have to have like just a dedicated journal only for content planning. And again, I type faster than I handwrite, so I'd rather just type it. So that's something that I use still. I also use Excel in particular for my financial kind of planning. So keeping track of all of my expenses, income sources, all of that kind of thing. I've got like a bill splitter built into that, so that then when I pay for things for, I don't know, when my friends and I go out to eat or whatever, and I'm just like, I'll just chuck it on my card and we can, you know, you can pay me back later. I have a space to organize those splits and stuff, which just makes the calculation a lot easier. And then I also have things like Outlook, you know, for, I mean, email already, you know, you have to have organization in that. Otherwise, oh my gosh, you know, when somebody's on their phone and you see the little red icon or whatever that tells you how many emails, I'm like, ah.
There should only be an icon there if you were doing something else and you were not looking at your phone. There should never in any way be a number. When I see people that have like over 1,000, I'm like, just dump the app.
I know.
Just delete it. You obviously don't use it.
burn it and start again. Control A, delete. Like, we'll just start again. It's just going to be easier. I'm sure most of it is just like email newsletters that you sign up to once and you don't read. But like, as soon as you see the comma, I'm just like, oh, the heebie-jeebies, no. Can't deal with it.
If I see double digits and that digit isn't just like a one, I'm like, you have a problem, clearly. I was trying to think, there are some really cool digital productivity tools that I use specifically for email. I'm going to mention it now, and then we're going to go in a different direction here because this is not the topic. But the stack method is a method that I've used, and I use it for work, and I absolutely love it. But maybe we could do a future episode around like maybe some productivity. It doesn't have to just be digital, but like productivity methods and things that we've used that have been helpful, because that's one that has been game changing for my own inbox and really been helpful in me organizing it, because I think that's probably the problem people have when they have hundreds or thousands of unopened emails, is they're just like, well, I don't know what to do with it. So maybe we can make a future topic about that.
I would be so super keen to talk about that kind of thing. Productivity is just like my happy place in general, and learning about productivity systems and different little tips and tricks and all of that. I would love that.
All right, so I was a good boy, and I actually dropped the note inside of our outline so we could come back to it. So we were talking about some of these other tools that kind of take an analog but a digital approach. I forget the notebooks that do this. There's a handful of them out there. I actually did a review on one a while back too. The idea that you are writing inside of an analog notebook, but usually they involve some type of special pen that is essentially transferring your analog writing into a digital space. Now, personally, for me, I see that as more of an automatic archiving of information. But I've never used any of these apps or anything enough to really think about, okay, I like to handwrite my notes here, but I'm going to use a digital planner over here to recall information or to set things up. I don't know. Have you had any experience with any of those, or any thoughts on like, do you consider that planning, or is that just archiving to you?
I don't know. I feel like it would very much come down to like the individual person's kind of like purpose and function that it's serving, because in a way it does feel more like archiving. It's that idea of like, digitizing the notes so you can find them again later, yada yada yada. But if you were using it specifically because you wanted to have the digital copies, then like maybe. But then I guess once you've made those digital files, you're not continuing to plan on them, are you? It's like you kind of make once, keep as a resource almost.
That's what I'm kind of thinking about that. But then it made me think about Remarkable, and that's a product that I want to use so bad. I just don't want to pay for it. I think the Remarkable 2 is like $500 or $600 or something crazy. And I'm like, it's just an e-ink device, but it looks so cool. And Natasha, I think, has one, right? I think she talks about hers a lot, but I've never used one. Have you ever had a chance to like fool with one or have one? I'm like, I would never buy one. And you're like, I got two and buy in my drawer.
Yeah, no, I do not have any, but I have gotten to play around with one. Funnily enough, it was Natasha's one. So yeah, so her one, she let me have a go at it and see how it worked. It was quite interesting. I don't know how I would necessarily use it or how I'd maybe bring it into my system, but that's because my system is fairly well established in terms of like what I like to do digitally versus what I like to do on paper. Because when it comes to note taking specifically, which is where I feel like I would possibly get the most benefit of it, I just prefer having a scribble book. Like, I would rather just have my beautiful, ugly book to write down scribble notes and draw scribble pictures and that kind of stuff.
You don't have that in a bullet journal, Jess? How dare you?
It's more of like a support notebook. So I use it for things like, when I'm coming to do a new setup or something like that. Something in particular that I've started doing is what I'm now calling a want analysis. So it's like wins, aversions, needs, and things to try. So I'll do that in here because I can hold it alongside my notebook and kind of go through the pages and be like, oh yeah, I like this about the setup. I didn't like this. This is something I need for next month or whatever, depending on what I'm setting up. But I also use it for just jotting down things very, very quickly. Like, I don't know, little scribble notes and stuff like that. It's things that don't need to be neat, don't need to be referred to again in future very much, but I don't want to litter my desk with small shrapnel pieces of paper type thing. So keep them all in one space.
Yeah, it's always my biggest thing. Every time I need to write down a note, I'm like, where am I writing it? Do I want to write it in my bullet journal? It's not really that important to go in there. Do I have an extra piece of paper? Do I just write it in my phone real quick? It's like this existential crisis that happens in my head. I'm like, maybe that could be a collection. I don't know just yet. Mark, just just write it down somewhere and get over it yourself.
I'm exactly the same way though. I get so persnickety about what I actually add into my journal, I swear, which is silly because like it's there so you can write in it, so just write the thing in it. But I'm like, but does it go here or should I put that information somewhere else? And I think it comes down to the processes that I have around transferring those notes, which I'm not very well established with, I suppose. It's like if I write it down on my weekly log or whatever, sure, it's captured somewhere. That's a win. At least it's somewhere that isn't my brain hole because, you know, brains are made for having ideas, not for holding them. So if I try and just remember it, I won't remember it. But if I write it down on my weekly, I still possibly won't remember it because I won't remember to go back through my weekly and find the note and then either turn it into an action or put it in a more appropriate place or anything like that. So now we're sitting here and I'm like, I need a dedicated journal just for notes. Where's another notebook? Oh my gosh.
I told you, it's a real problem that we have.
It's an addiction, I swear, just like setting up new notebooks all the time.
Well, Planner Pals, we're very interested to hear from you. This week's question is, have you tried digital planning before? And if you have, we would love to know the apps that you're using and definitely the pros and the cons. So make sure you leave a comment on the YouTube video if you're watching there. You can also always email us at plannerpalspodcast@gmail.com and also hit us up over at Planner Pals Podcast over on Instagram as well. Jess, what are we going to be talking about on our next episode?
So something that has come to my attention, which I don't know whether to be alarmed or maybe they're just hiding, but like, where are our planner guys? Like, where them boys at? I can't find them. I mean, obviously we have you and we know and love you.
Sure.
And we have had other planner guys pop up from time to time, but I feel like they're either hiding from me and I just can't find them, or maybe we're just genuinely lacking guy creators in the planner space.
This is the whole reason that I actually started my Instagram account. When I started Men Who Bullet was for this exact reason. There was only a handful of guys in the community, and I thought, like, there has to be more. And if not, like, let's promote them even more. So I love this topic because it's always the one people ask me in the community, like, where them boys at? And I'm like, here's my list of people who I really enjoy that are male creators or in this space. But what's interesting, I was thinking about this, is I need to go back through. I used to have a chat in Instagram that was just for all of the male creators, and I haven't been in there a while, not a lot of activity. I'm curious how many of them are still around. I'll go ahead and bring my list to the table, but definitely we'll just kind of pull them together, definitely talk about where they are and why we don't see as many of them necessarily in the planner community, but also promote and talk about some of our favorites too. It'll be super fun.
Now I'm looking forward to it, especially just like being able to hear your list and check out some new creators for myself, which I always love to do. So I hope that you will join us next time, Planner Pals, but for now, thank you for watching.